for many years.
Thank you. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to join my colleagues and the ranking member and the chairman for condemning the violence of last night. We all abhor political violence and should, in every way, I think, investigate. And as the ranking member said, I think that it would be good to have a briefing from the FBI. I take note of something as one of the bipartisan leaders of our efforts on anti-Semitism to note that hate crimes in this country targeting religious groups are seen in so many of America's great religions, but none come close to the targeting of American Jews. And that should be an added layer of analysis as we try to combat this kind of violence and these kind of hate crimes. Mr. Chairman, I wanted to make 3 points very quickly and ask for some oversight hearings. Trump's Department of Justice has taken numerous concerning actions that demand the committee to exercise constitutional oversight. We are a co-equal branch in a government with checks and balances, and we need to address these issues in hearings. There are 3 concerning DOJ actions that I hope we can discuss, Mr. Chairman. First, we have the issue of due process-less deportations. This week, the conservative Cato Institute reported that over 50 of the Venezuelans imprisoned in El Salvador came to the U.S. legally with advanced U.S. government permission and entered at an official border crossing. Most Americans have only heard of Kilmar Obrego Garcia, but this report from the Cato Institute makes clear he is not the only person who was deported by the Trump administration without due process, who was legally in the United States. I'd like to without objection, I'd like to enter this Cato report into the record. I want to reiterate the committee's request led by my colleague, Senator Welch, for an oversight hearing into the circumstances surrounding the deportations of more than 200 people removed to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Acts, including the 50 individuals who, I repeat, entered the country legally through with our permission and are now in what is one of the more awful prisons on this planet. Mr. Chairman, you have for decades led and championed the Senate Judiciary Committee's exercise of our oversight, and we need to know who are these 50 people. Can we at least confirm their names and that they're still alive? And understand that an assault on due process anywhere is a threat to the due process rights everywhere. We have seen a 9-0 Supreme Court affirm that. Secondly, at last week's markup, you talked about the Department of Justice's cancellations of public safety grants. Here I have an unanswered letter I wrote on April 30th that was signed by every Democratic member of this committee and 30 Democratic senators total, which I'd like to enter into the record.
Is there objection? I hear none, so it's entered.
We were asking the department for information about the Office of Justice Program's abrupt decisions to cancel at least 365 public safety grants on April 22nd, 2025 that serve crime victims and improve public safety, totaling an estimated $500 million. These are programs that were supported in a bipartisan way that have led to more safety and security and strength in our community. Some of them have helped victims of crime, and they have been unjustly canceled. On the day of this letter, DOJ defunded programs that prosecutors, police, and sheriff's departments, judges, mental health service providers, academics, and more depend upon to keep America safe. This is an outrage to all of us on this committee who share a commitment to public safety, to have resources that we put out that we're being effective in an evidence-based way, to have them stopped by this administration demands that we at least have an oversight hearing to provide, to get a justification, or at the very least have letters responded to. Finally, Mr. Chairman, the Justice Department dismissed several civil rights cases against pattern and practice agencies of law enforcement yesterday. Almost 5 years to the day, this country watched in horror, and we all condemned, when a now convicted criminal, then a police officer, used deadly force to murder George Floyd. The Justice Department Civil Rights Division thereafter investigated the Minneapolis Police Department's pattern and practices of constitutional violations and proposed a fair, court-enforceable consent order to prevent future police misconduct, but to improve the excellence of police accountability and professional standards. They did the same in Louisville, Kentucky, after Breonna Taylor was killed by police during a no-knock raid that was condemned by people on this committee and beyond in a bipartisan way. Yesterday, AG Bondi's Justice Department dropped both consent decrees in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Louisville, Kentucky, where neutral investigations and attorneys found evidence of constitutional and civil rights violations by those law enforcement agencies. Without more than saying that the consent decrees were, quote, no longer in the public interest, the department dismissed those cases along with 6 other investigations where it had shown a pattern and practice of the constitutional violations against American citizens. I sent a letter to the DOJ yesterday with my Democratic colleagues requesting the preservation of and submissions to the committee materials related to retracted police misconduct investigations and drop consent decrees. I ask to enter this letter into the record, sir.
Is there objection? I hear none, so it's entered.
To add to the further outrage to these DOJ actions, there are reports today that people are pushing the Trump administration to pardon Chauvin. This would be unacceptable, outrageous, and injurious to the public safety, injurious to community trust, injurious to the environments we need that keep people safe and support our law enforcement officers. We are lacking in our oversight of a department that appears to be on a turbocharged chip away at civil rights protections and not do common sense measures that can make our communities stronger and safer and have the highest professional standards in policing. I ask again for this third time that you hold an oversight hearing so that we can get some of the answers that Congress and the public deserve. As someone who used to be a mayor and oversee a police department that itself had a pattern and practice investigations, this is not to an end other than making our police department stronger, raising our professional standards, deepening trust, and ultimately creating an environment where we have greater community safety. I hope on these 3 issues we can have oversight hearings soon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With all the requests for oversight hearings, I think we're going to have to prioritize that. Before I call on the senator from Rhode Island, you mentioned something I said last week about grants, and I think I had information yet before the meeting was over that grants for nonprofits and law enforcement, that they were going to reinstitute the ones for law enforcement. That's what I think I said last week, Senator Whitehouse.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to that, sir?
Yeah.
Some of the proudest work that I've seen in this committee done by people on both sides, courageous leadership by Senator Cornyn and people on our side of the aisle, passed this extraordinary bill on public safety. And a lot of those grants weren't just to law enforcement that were improved. They were to address mental health, something we've all talked about on both sides of the aisle. To focus just on grants directly to law enforcement and not the grants that are going to institutions that help people with mental health. We know a lot of the gun crimes in our country have a lot of unaddressed mental health illness there. And so all of these grants are important, sir, not just the ones that are vital for law enforcement, but also the ones that are vital for public safety that go to nonprofits that deal with things like mental health that are critical for public safety.
Well, Senator Whitehouse and Senator Schiff withhold. We've got 11 people here, and I'd like to vote on